let's continue. They they ordered these particles in patterns, and we found these. They found these octets, so these sets of 8 particles here. Some of them you might recognize. There's strangeness here, there's charge here in both of them, and they could order them. Of course, if you see patterns, then that's perhaps a part of the solution. They could also do that with some of the heavier elements, heavier particles, and we have this scheme, except that there was one particle in there that wasn't found yet, this particle. So Murray-Gell-Mann was a physicist who said, well, there must be this particle, and he did a prediction of that. You can find this particle with strangeness -3, whatever that means, but basically has to do with mass also. Charge -1 and exactly, well, roughly this mass. And this was in 1964, I believe, and a couple of years later, it was indeed found. Exactly this particle. So that's always a good thing. If you have a theory, that's nice if it explains everything that you saw before. But if you can make a prediction of something that hasn't been seen, and then it is found, roughly with the properties that you described, that's a good thing. So of course he got a Nobel Prize. We have all these particles now. Heavy particles, you see the numbers much more than the proton. So what is happening? Well, from this structure that we saw, you get the idea, well, perhaps there are 3 particles working together. So you see all these triangles in the figure and everything. So they called it up, down, and strange now. The first time they said up, down, and sideways, as a different name for the particle. Later was called strange because of the strangeness property. With these charges, these are fractions of the electron charge. And then with strangeness 0, 0 or -1. And then you could combine them only in these ways. So 3 quarks together. They were called quarks. It's just a random name from a poem by James Joyce about a drunk man ordering drinks, beer probably, and he wanted to say quarks probably, and he said quarks with a K, and he ordered 3 quarks, and Murray-Gell-Mann remembered this poem. He had these 3 particles, he needed names for that, he remembered the poem, said, oh, let's call them quarks. It doesn't have any meaning beyond that. It's just a name for, I have 3 things and I have to give them a name. Let's call them quarks. And he got the idea, well, you can only combine them this way or that way. This is a quark with an anti-quark. If we know that, and we have these 3 quarks, then of course we can build particles. Let's build mesons with a roughly intermediate mass. We can build well, all these combinations. So we can do this, and these particles are those. We saw the pions here, we have the kaons, we have some extra particles, the ether particles, and some that I haven't mentioned. But basically, the particles that we saw, we can explain. And of course, we can also build baryons, so the heavy particles, that consists of 3 quarks. So we have this scheme with all the possibilities, and we see all these particles, including the neutron and the proton. Now you can see the neutron and the delta 0 and the proton and the delta plus have the same quark content, so they have the same quarks. But basically the delta particles have a higher energy. Like in atoms, you know that if an atom is in the ground state, the electron has the lowest energy. You can excite an electron and it's still in a bound state, but the whole atom has slightly more energy. Now, these delta particles are excited states of the neutron and proton. So they have more energy, but the energy difference is much bigger than in atoms. So the energy difference is so big that you consider them a different particle. So that's why they have a different name. And also the omega minus, the triple strange quark, is in here. And I have these 10 combinations of 3 quarks, but I can also do everything anti. Okay, so we can build particles now with this model. Now the thing is, how do you stick them together? Why only with 3 quarks, or 1 quark and 1 anti-quark? Well, the explanation was they must have something like a charge, not the electric charge, but what we call color charge. Again, we have 3 colors that together form a white color. They are not actually colors of the quarks, but it's called color charge. Like electric charge, what is electricity? We don't really know, but we call it electricity or electric charge. well, this is color charge, some property of these particles, and you need three of them together. So basically three of these colors together, they turn into white. We can also have mesons with red and anti-red, green and anti-green, blue and anti-blue. Don't call them yellow, just say anti-blue, because blue and anti-blue together is white. So we can only have white or colorless particles. Now, why we don't see them separately, why don't we see separate colored quarks, is because of color confinement, as they say. That means if we try to pull them apart, this happens. You try to pull them apart, it costs energy. You put so much energy into that basically new particles appear. And you always see them in pairs like this, or even in triplets like this. So that's only a sort of explanation of why we don't see these color charges in separate quarks. But you have to explain why these quarks only stay together in pairs of 3, or in triplets, or in pairs of 2, like that. Now, this is all just theory, but the nice thing is there is a confirmation of that. And that goes back to what we saw with the proton, with the atom. The atom structure we found like this, they did an experiment and they saw these angles of great deflection. So basically, shoot particles at that, most of them go straight ahead, and some have a really great angle away from the forward direction. Now, they did the same experiment with protons, and they found the same thing. So this, if you see these angles, that means if not everything goes straight ahead, but you have some that have very different angles, that means there must be some structure inside. And they saw the same thing with the proton. So basically you have this for the atom. So if everything is distributed uniformly, then everything stays on a dashed line. Now you see these angles, they have more counts. So there are more particles that you don't expect at large angles. They saw the same thing with the proton. So basically that means that also in a proton there must be a substructure. There must be a core and some outside that is different. So not a uniformly distributed thing. So basically they found the parts in a proton, the quarks. So we think that a proton looks like this, with 2 up quarks and 1 down quark, plus 2/3, another 2/3, minus 1/3, together this is plus 1, and then of course with 3 different colors. This is a very simple picture, and this is the net picture. In total, the proton looks more like this. So we have all these quarks and anti-quarks, red and green. So let's say that the red is the anti-quark and the green is the normal quark. These are not the colors that you saw before. All these things connecting them are gluons. They are the connecting force carriers basically. And there's lots of pairs together. They come into existence and then they annihilate again. See, every time. And then there's one here, there's another one here, and there's a separate one here. So these are the 3 quarks that make up the proton charge. And all the others, they cancel, but basically they add to the total energy of the proton. Because just the masses of the 3 quarks is not enough, not nearly enough. All the energy together makes up the mass, the energy of a proton. So, I told you that all these particles that are glued together, they are called gluons, basically, to glue them together. And this interaction can now be understood like this. So we have these 3 quarks, a neutron and a proton, and they have this exchange of this meson, two quarks, the pi 0 is in this case, and we have the gluons here interacting. So this is basically now how we understand that particles in the nucleus stay together.